Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Zoom-in session of Vasant Vihar Club. Today, for the second time in this series, we have MK Wealth coming and talking to you about succession planning and what all of us perhaps need to do well in time. In their first session, they did talk about making a will, how to go about that process, and later on, I believe they helped some of the club members to write their will or construct their will. I think that is that is of course a very important thing, and the pandemic did sort of expedite or hasten that process for a lot of people. Please. Um, And the other thing that was of interest to a lot of people was that those of us who have decided that as a succession planning and as the legal sort of consequence, they would like to form a trust where they could leave their either movable or immovable assets and leave them in the control or trust of a few family members or even non-family members. And there was a request at that time from some of the members to hold another session where the subject of private trust formation should be taken up specifically. And we are happy that MK Wealth has agreed to do this session. Let me quickly introduce to you our main speaker today. Namita Agarwal is heads the estate and succession planning vertical at MK Private Wealth. Prior to joining MK, she has worked with Emicorp Trustees, a multinational trust company, offering trust solutions to clients and actively managing these trusts. She is a lawyer and a company secretary with 15 years of experience in succession planning. She advises families, business houses, HNIs having wealth across different countries, complex business structures, and NRI families. She has been instrumental in creating awareness about the need to create a succession plan by conducting sessions for various social and corporate groups. And that, of course, includes the Vasant Vihar Club. As I said, that she did uh, hold a session earlier. And today, Namita, welcome to the session. And uh, let me right away go into the subject that why should somebody, as part of their inheritance or their will, why should they uh, put their assets, as I said, either movable or immovable, into a trust? What is the benefit of doing that? Or maybe you can even talk about what is the disadvantage of doing that and why a private trust rather than a public trust.
Uh, f- Thank you, Raj sir. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much for giving us this opportunity again to come and present and have this session on private family trust for these members. I would like to firstly welcome all the members who are participating in today's session. And right away, I will start with a session on private family trust, which, as Raj sir mentioned, is an extension of the previous session which we had conducted. So this would be a little more technical, where we will talk about legal aspects, tax aspects of a private trust.
Namita, before you go ahead, the president would like to welcome you. So, General Shankar Prasad, please, if you could welcome,
My apologies, sorry. Yeah.
if you could welcome the speaker for this evening, our guest.
Well, that's all right. I mean, whether you do it, Raj does it, or we are all Vasant Vihari. So, Namitaji, a very warm welcome from the president in particular, and from all the members of the managing committee, the club committee, and the society. We are very grateful to you for having come to make another presentation to us on trusts. But having now got an opportunity to say a couple of words, without ruffling any feathers, when you talk of a trust, certain trusts cross your mind. And I do hope you will, well, you may or you may not touch on them because they could be quite controversial. But the moment you talk of a trust, you talk of certain political parties, political families having trusts and huge sums of money in that, and how that money is used by them and how that money is used by the others is something that intrigues all those people who are looking at scams and things like that. And also, there are some number of people who kind of create wealth, maybe not legally so well, and convert it into trusts to probably hide it, or I'm not too sure how they manage that. But it often appears in the newspapers and the television channels and debates of these trusts. So I'm quite interested in listening to all of it because knowledge on this is very poor. Everybody knows how to make a will and everybody knows how to put money in the fixed deposits. But to how to create a trust and how the trustees and the trust continues thereafter is something which is very interesting. Even schools have trusts, and many schools are run by the trustees, and exactly what the role is in running those schools is also important. For example, the modern school is run by the board of trustees, who are all practically the descendants of the owners of the school. So how long that continues, what exactly is the meaning of that, one would be quite interested in knowing. So with these little words, thank you very much for joining us once again. And thanks a lot on behalf of all of us. We're very eagerly looking forward to your presentation. And thank you so much, Raj, and the others who have done it. And of course, Sanjana, thank you very much. Over to you, Raj, and over to Namita again.
Thank you, sir. I expected you to talk about the Modern School Trust, and yes, that would be of interest to me also when as she proceeds. But we will talk about that later, about the charitable trusts and of course the difference between private and public trust. So over to you, Namita. Tell us more about this subject.
Sure, sir. And I will definitely, cover all the queries which Prasad sir had during this conversation. But before that, just let me begin with the basics, where I could explain what is, the basics of the trust. And then, we could have a discussion on all these aspects. So I will just share my presentation on the screen. So firstly, let us understand what do we mean by succession planning. Because a trust, when we are talking about a private trust, it's a very efficient vehicle to plan for your succession. And when we talk about succession planning, it means passing on your wealth to the next generation and passing it in a manner which will avoid any kind of family disputes or any kind of legal hassles, and particularly according to your own wishes, and that too after the person himself has enjoyed this wealth during his or her lifetime. So we structure their wealth where they can plan for their own retirement, incapacitation, and then pass it to the next in line. This may include preparing wills, private trusts, charitable trusts, sometimes business restructuring, guardianship designation, all of these. Now, let us also understand that if a person has not created a succession plan, if he does not have a will or a trust in place, the very basics is that the property of such a person will go as per the laws which are prevailing in our country. And these laws are based on the religion of each person. For example, the Hindus are governed by the Hindu Succession Act. So if there is a married man, his legal heirs would be his wife, children, and mother in equal proportion. For a married woman, it is her husband and children who are the legal heirs for all their properties. The Christian intercaste marriages, Parsis, they are governed by the Indian Succession Act, in which case also there is a division between the spouse and children. Sometimes parents also have a share in it. Muslims have a restriction on how much they can give through the will. They can only give away 1/3 through the will, and the remaining devolves as per their Sharia laws. But what we see generally in 99%, or I would say even 100% of the cases, a person does not want to transfer his assets in this manner. And law gives them a choice to write down a will or prepare a succession plan to divide their assets as per their wishes. So typically we would see that, any individual may first want to pass on a majority of the assets to the spouse. I mean, generally talking about, and even when they are distributing to their children, they may want to distribute specifically instead of dividing all assets equally. Maybe, they would want to give the Vasanti Vihar property to one child, a property in Noida or Gurgaon to the other child. So this specific allocation can only be done through a proper succession plan. So because of this, it becomes very important to put down a succession plan so that you can divide your assets as per your own wishes. There are different tools available to plan for the same. The most primary and the basic tool is preparing a will. For a will, you can write down your assets, make a list of your assets, and designate which family member would inherit those assets. So there are certain common questions around will writing. Can I write a will on a simple paper? Yes, it can be written on a simple paper. You don't have to write on a stamp paper or a green legal paper. Notarization, registration, none of it is required. The only legal requirement is that it should be drafted properly. It should be signed by the person who is writing the will, and it should be signed by 2 witnesses. Registration, though it is not compulsory, but we generally advise that one should have a registered will. So in this case, if a will ever gets challenged on grounds like it was a forged document, or the person was not mentally capacitated, or he was forced to make a will in a particular manner, these grounds get removed because the person who is making the will physically goes to the registrar office and he is signing in front of him. So because of which the grounds for challenging the will comes down. So this is a simple.
Sorry to be asking this, but since you mentioned that it should be properly drafted, that could be a very subjective term.
Yes, so the intention of the person should be very clearly spelled out. I mean, sometimes while drafting, if there are loopholes, it may lead to different interpretations by the family member and by the court. So because of which it becomes important to draft it properly.
So therefore, some kind of advice from an expert on will drafting would be necessary. Is that what you mean?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you should always take the help of an expert person who has an experience in these kind of drafting. Now, I will start with the session on private family trust, which is another important tool of succession planning. So just explaining how a trust is formed, the basics of the trust. Like will is a document which comes into effect after the lifetime of the person. But a private trust is a separate entity or a separate structure which is created, which will hold the assets of the person who wants to create a succession plan. And then these assets can be enjoyed by all the family members. So a trust deed is created through a document known as a trust deed. There are 3 parties to the trust as identified by the Indian Trust Act. There is a settlor, there are trustees, and there are beneficiaries. So settlor is the person who wants to create his or her succession plan. He will create the trust deed, or create the trust and transfer the assets in the name of the trust. There are beneficiaries. These beneficiaries are from the family members. So these are the identified family members who are entitled to receive benefits from the family trust. And then there are trustees. Trustees are the people who will manage the assets which have been transferred in the name of the trust. And this could be the settlor himself. It could be anybody from the family. I mean, it could be the children, the spouse. One could appoint a friend or a professional person like a chartered accountant, lawyer, or a corporate trustee to administer the trust assets. Once the trust has been formed, it has its separate identity. It will obtain a separate PAN number. So under Income Tax Act, it gets an identity. After that, the trust can open a bank account, a demat account. And that is how the settlor can start gifting or transferring the assets in the name of the trust from his or her bank account to the trust bank account. And this is created through the trust deed. So the trust deed is like, it's like the bylaws of, the whole trust which you have created. which spells out the roles, responsibilities of the trustees, what are the rights of the beneficiaries, at what stages the beneficiaries would receive distribution from the trust. All that is mentioned, defined under the trust deed. So once this is created, it has to be executed. The trust deed needs to be signed by the settlor and the trustees. So when we are executing it, either it could be registered or unregistered. Both are valid. But again, a registered document is always more authentic. And if we are planning to transfer immovable assets or buy immovable properties under the trust, then it should be a registered trust document. So this was just the basics as to, how the legal structuring happens. Once the trust has been formed, once it has been set up, the settlor or even other family members can start transferring assets in the name of the trust. And this would include every type of asset which an individual owns. So if somebody owns company shares, this can be easily gifted in the name of the trust. From bank account to bank account, a transfer can be done. If there is a demat account, there is an off-market transfer which happens. Similarly, other movable assets can be gifted in the name of the trust. And in such kind of retitling of assets or gifting assets to the trust, we do not have any kind of, stamp, like, gift duties or capital gain tax, except for real estate. So for real estate, when we are transferring into a trust, there is a stamp duty which is applicable. Like in Delhi, it is 6%. If you have an asset in some other state, then the stamp duty may vary, but it is typically like, between 5%, 6%, which is applicable. And because of this reason, we generally do not transfer immovable properties in the name of the trust during the lifetime of the person. It is only, we mention under the will that after the demise of the person, the real estate will move into the trust. And at that point of time, we do not have to pay any stamp duty. So this is how the trust gets funded. And then the trust is active and live. And then the trust is holding your capital assets, and which will also generate income. And this corpus and income can then be distributed to the beneficiaries as it has been outlined in the trust deed. And all this is managed by the trustees. So the trustee would be a signatory to all the documentation. For example, if there is any immovable property, the trustee is liable to pay the property taxes. The trustee could lease out those properties. So trustee will administer these assets for the benefit of the beneficiaries. We have understood the basic concept as to how it is created. But why should we create a trust in the very first place? I mean, if things can be done under a will, how is it a better tool of succession planning when we compare it with a will? So let us understand some major benefits or objectives why clients really prefer a trust over a will. The first benefit is that it provides asset protection. Typically, we look at asset protection either from creditor claims or claims under divorce proceedings, matrimonial claims. So what happens under a trust is that the legal ownership and the beneficial ownership is segregated. It is your trust which is the legal owner. And there are several family members over here who are the beneficiaries to it. So not a single family member doesn't own any assets. So if there is any creditor liability on a person, so for example, son is a beneficiary over here. If there is any kind of an attachment, a creditor liability or under a divorce proceeding, because he does not own these assets cannot be attached. But of course, this trust has to be structured properly. And when you are transferring assets into the trust, you should be solvent at that point of time. And one should look at the IBC code, the insolvency and the bankruptcy code, which says that any transfer which you have done 2 years prior to insolvency can be attached. So when you are transferring, creating such a structure, it should be during your solvency and during good times. Because if you are doing it to defraud your creditors, of course, the creditors can come behind the trust assets. And typically, it's like, the business promoters who have given their personal guarantees when the company is taking a loan to expand the business. So they need this kind of a protection where they can segregate a portion of their wealth for the benefit of their family members, for their usual lifestyle expenses, medical, healthcare, education, so that even if something goes wrong with the company where it is in default, all the personal assets do not get attached. There is something which has been segregated for their family members. And also we see that, the divorce cases in India has been rising in the past few years. So a lot of parents are concerned that what if I give all my assets to my son and later on there is a fallout in the marriage? I don't want my family wealth to be eroded in such kind of circumstances. I'm okay to give it to my daughter-in-law, provided, she remains married to my son. So all this can be built under the trust deed and assets can be protected from such kind of claims. So this is one benefit where the trust will also protect assets apart from planning for your succession. Second benefit of a trust is that it avoids the process of probate or challenges which can be made under a will. So will, if you would see, it becomes an open document for all the family members. And any family member who is dissatisfied with what is written under the will can challenge the will. And once the will is challenged, the proceedings can keep going on in the court for many number of years. And we have seen in the will of Mrs. Priyambada Bidla, where the matter is, still going on in the court. So these kind of challenges are avoided under a private family trust, because private trust offers privacy protection. If you have given assets to your son, but if you have disinherited your daughter cannot challenge it, because this is something which has been created during lifetime, and during your lifetime you have already transferred assets in the name of the trust. So this is another benefit which avoids challenges, which generally does happen under a will. Many families, sometimes we see that there are special children, there are children who are autistic. These children, because they are considered mentally incapacitated, in a legal language, they can never contract on behalf of themselves, and they cannot sign on documents. And of course, even they are not in a position to take any kind of financial decisions. But parents are generally concerned that after the lifetime, there should be somebody who is managing assets on their behalf, and they continue to receive benefits for their lifetime, for their routine expenses. So here also a trust is a very viable structure, wherein whatever you want to give to your special children, you put it into a trust, you appoint trustees who will manage these assets and keep making timely distribution to the children. Very important consideration over here is that how to choose a trustee. So whoever is the trustee should have a very close bond with the child, where they understand the requirements of the special children and who would work for their benefit. So sometimes it's the sibling. If the sibling is not available, the settler would really need to make a choice over here that, who is the most trusted person and who would provide for the best possible care of my child once I'm not around. And in such kind of trusts also, the investment guidelines are laid down. Like typically we would mention the assets of the trust should be invested in capital protected instruments. They should not be traded. Business should not be carried down. There is a clause like, that every month such an amount should be distributed to the child. If there is a medical emergency, for travel, leisure, for these different activities, how it should be distributed. So it's a very detailed guidelines the parents can actually provide in the trust deed itself. Apart from this, another advantage, another benefit is family business succession, wherein through the trust route, you can provide for the succession of your family business. When I say family business, it means the first, second, or the third generation of family members are together running the business. So when we create such a business trust, typically what we do is that the shares of the company, the shares of the private company or the listed company are transferred in the name of the trust. So the trust becomes the shareholder, and the trustees on behalf of the trust would have the voting rights. and the beneficiaries are all the family members over here. Now, what are the benefits of creating a business trust? I mean, generally, how is it created? So the first benefit is the trust would consolidate all the shareholding of the family members. It is not fragmented or segregated with different family members, where they could deal with it in the manner which they like. They cannot, just gift it or transfer it to anybody. It is kept consolidated at the trust level where everybody gets to enjoy it. Secondly, it segregates the ownership from the management. Now, there could be family members who are active in the business, and there could be family members who are not active in the business. So it is only the active members. They would be on the board of trustees who would have voting rights. But the non-active members are only beneficiaries under the trust. They will not have any voting rights, and they will not interfere in the day-to-day management of the trust. Like in this diagram, if we see, for example, son is the person who is managing the business. But the daughter is married and she is not a part of the family business. But maybe the parents would like her to have some entitlement as a beneficiary, but without any kind of interference in the business. So the daughter can remain as a beneficiary of the trust, whereas the son would be on the board of trustees. So this is how it segregates, delinks ownership from the management. Also, it may happen that the settler, after the age of 65 or 70, he wants to retire. He steps down as a trustee. He doesn't take any decisions. But because he is a primary beneficiary over here, he would still be entitled to receive the benefits of his own trust. So this is a better solution rather than, just gifting away assets to the son. Rather, create a trust and have your beneficial rights under the same. Also, when we create a business trust, there are a lot of clauses like, non-compete obligations, right of first refusal, exit clauses, that if a family member wants to exit the company, all these are drafted into the trust deed. So there is a holistic succession planning which is created for business families through a trust route. Coming to the next benefit of a trust, multi-generation succession. So of course, the settler, while he is defining who would be the beneficiaries, he could define up to first, second, third, or even up to the fourth generation. Who will be the beneficiaries? Who should be included or excluded from the family legacy? Whether he would like to include the daughter-in-law, the son-in-law, it is his wish. He could also put in conditions that my daughter-in-law will be the beneficiary provided she is still married with my son. But if they are not together, then she would not be the beneficiary anymore. So this kind of a customization can be done under a trust deed. And lastly, planning for inheritance taxes. This is especially for NRI children. We see that, there is a lot of migration which has happened to other countries where Indians have gone and settled in US and UK. And these kind of countries, most of the developed countries, they have inheritance taxes. Like, for example, even in India, we had these estate duties up till 1985, but it was abolished in 1985. Sorry. So if you have children who are settled in such countries, trust is a good mechanism to plan to mitigate for these inheritance taxes. I will explain this in detail over here in the next slide. Here, if you see, if we have an Indian parent who wishes to transfer 100% of his wealth to a child who is in US. Now the US child will receive 100% of the wealth because we do not have any inheritance tax in India. And generally the tax is levied on the donor. So while this US person will receive 100% of the wealth, but when this 100 rupees is further transferred down to the grandchildren, there could be a 40% erosion of wealth under the US inheritance taxes. On the other hand, if the Indian parent creates a trust where he transfers this 100 rupees in the trust, he will name his son as the primary beneficiary and then grandchildren as the successor beneficiary. Quite possible that the son only uses 20 rupees out of this 100. The remaining 80 rupees will remain in the Indian trust, which can then be enjoyed by the grandchild. So at this level, the inheritance tax which was applicable is avoided over here. And these are proper legal structures, which can be created, because the US government says that if there is an offshore asset which is not in US, which has which has not been contributed by the US, which was owned by an Indian person, if it is segregated under a separate trust, the inheritance tax will not be applicable. But once it gets mixed up with the US child, so the US child will have his or own assets. So the global wealth is taxable. Once it gets mixed up, then they cannot segregate, and the global wealth would be subject to inheritance taxes. So trust is a useful way of mitigating the risk of these kind of taxes.
Namita, you have talked about the benefits of forming a trust, and we have talked at length about it, but I'm sure there are some drawbacks also of a private trust. Can you highlight the drawbacks?
So there is really no drawback of really having a private trust, because it's like your own entity, because whatever you are contributing into the trust, it is for the benefit of your own family members. And when we draw up these structures, there is a lot of flexibility which is given to the settlor, to the beneficiaries, as to how and when they can withdraw these assets. So in this example, if I see, there is a son who is a beneficiary. If he wants to dissolve the trust, he can take away everything in his own name. He can withdraw the entire corpus and dissolve the trust. So the flexibility which is offered. So there is really no disadvantage of having a trust, because it's your own structure, it's your own family entity. The only challenge here is sometimes identifying a proper trustee. If your own family members are trustees, fine and good. But at times it happens that because you want to create an asset protection trust, or because all the family members are NRIs, then choosing a trustee sometimes becomes a challenge over here, which we discuss with client. We explore different options as to how it can be worked out. And sometimes the powers are retained by the settlor. We also bring in a third party known as a protector, which is a very worldwide accepted term, where the protector may be given the authority, the main authority maybe to change the trustees. So if a person cannot become a trustee, he could wear the hat of a protector. So all that can be worked out, but otherwise there is really no disadvantage of having a private trust.
While we are at it, if I may just ask one more question. I've heard of master and sub-trust structures. What is that?
Trust structures we generally use for business families. So for example, there is a person who has his company shareholding, say a listed company. Apart from those shareholding, he would also have his personal assets, say financial wealth or real estate. And he has 2 children, a son and a daughter. So he will create a business trust. When he is creating a business trust for listed company, that trust would be as per the SEBI guidelines. And it will only hold the business assets, where a business succession plan is created. Under that trust, I would create sub-trusts, one for the son, one for the daughter. And these sub-trusts would actually hold the personal assets, which could be jewelry, cash, investments. So these are personal assets which he would like to give individually to the son and to the daughter. So sometimes we create a master sub-trust structure, typically for business families.
Okay, good. Thank you. Understood.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Okay. So moving on to next slide. In the previous slides, we covered the advantages of a trust. Typically, these are based on the objectives of the client. So whatever could be the objective, whether it is business succession, whether it is for a special child, or for US inheritance tax purpose, we form a trust. But at the same time, we also need to give consideration to the legal and the tax aspects when we are structuring these kind of trust. So under Income Tax Act, the trust is classified as revocable or irrevocable trust. When I say revocable trust, it means that the settler of the trust has the power to cancel or revoke the trust. He can take back all the assets in his personal name. And an irrevocable trust means that the person cannot cancel the trust. They have relinquished right, control, and beneficial interest in favor of the beneficiaries. As per the Income Tax Act, if it's a revocable trust, the income of the trust gets clubbed with the income of the settlor. But for irrevocable trust, the taxation is either at the trust level or at the beneficiary level. And typically, we suggest creating an irrevocable trust if a person is looking at asset protection during his or her lifetime. And after the demise of the settlor, so if the settlor has created a revocable trust after his lifetime, the trust automatically will become irrevocable trust because the settlor is no longer there. So then he cannot take back assets, and it is only continuing for the family members. So after the parents are not there who have created the trust, it will give asset protection to the succeeding generations. The next classification of a trust is a specific trust or a discretionary trust. When I say specific trust, I mean the share of each beneficiary under the trust is specified or defined. So if there is a son and a daughter, their share could be 50% and 50%. Under a discretionary trust, the share of the beneficiaries is not defined. It is left at the discretion of the trustee as to how much should be distributed to each and every beneficiary. So these are two classifications. From a tax aspect, if it's a specific trust, the income taxation is paid at the beneficiary level. But if it's a discretionary trust, the taxation will happen at the trust level. So this is regarding taxation. But when we are structuring, primarily we consider if we are looking at asset protection, then it should be an irrevocable discretionary trust. Because if it is discretionary where the share of each beneficiary is not defined, then it becomes difficult for anybody to attach the assets. But if the share of an individual is defined, that it is 50%, the court can always say that, you have a 50% share in the trust assets, and now you can pay back your liabilities from this 50% of your assets. So it is better to have an irrevocable discretionary if we are looking at an asset protection angle. Then when we plan to move the shares of listed companies into a trust, there are certain guidelines which have been set up by SEBI. So there was this regulation which had come up in 2017, and basic guidelines are that the settlor, trustee, and the beneficiaries, they should all be from the promoter group or the blood relatives of the promoters. So in this case, there is a little bit of a restriction where we cannot have outside trustees. We cannot appoint a corporate trustee or a professional trustee. And these guidelines were actually issued because there were a lot of listed companies in the year, from 2013 onwards, who were moving into the trust, especially for inheritance tax planning and for succession planning, sometimes for restructuring their companies. And earlier application had to be made to SEBI for individual company. But this is a proper format, based on this format, the listed companies can write to SEBI to transfer their shareholding in the name of the trust. Then when we are forming a trust for NRI beneficiaries, so if I have an Indian trust where beneficiaries are in US, UK, or any other country, it is very important to understand the laws of that country as well, because there could be consequences in terms of taxation if the trust deed is not structured or drafted properly. When I say structuring a trust, I mean identifying the right parties, that who will be the settlor, trustee, or beneficiaries. What will be the powers which will be given to them. So under US laws, if you tend to give too many powers, especially the substantial decision-making powers to a US person. Now this US person could either be a trustee or a beneficiary of the trust. The US court says that we will deem that the trust is a US trust, and then it would have negative tax consequences, income tax and estate tax consequences. So we need to avoid this kind of a language when we are building up the trust. And at times we work with our counterparts in other countries to understand that, who should have what kind of powers. Also, citing another example over here, like generally when we create a trust for a US beneficiary, there is a rule known as a throwback rule, which says that if there is any income which is generated in the trust, you should not accumulate that income over a number of years. You should distribute it in the same year. And if you accumulate it, and if you say you distribute after 5 years or 10 years, there would be additional penalty which would be levied on that accumulated income. So these are very specific rules for each and every country, which we need to understand and accordingly draft the trust deed so that we do not face negative tax consequences. So this was regarding NRI beneficiaries. Similarly, somebody may have assets in different parts of the world. So they may have assets in India, maybe a real estate in Dubai, some assets in Singapore or in US. So when you have assets in different parts of the world, when we are creating a will for them, either it could be a single will, which is known as a multi-jurisdiction will. And a multi-jurisdiction will is also valid, which covers assets across the world, or there could be separate situs will, which is a separate will for each and every jurisdiction. And it is preferable to have a separate will for each country, because every country may have a local rule or a local law, which we may not be aware of, which the local lawyer would know. And even when we are drafting it, the local language while drafting the will may vary from country to country. So the local court would be able to understand, what the will is trying to say. So in such cases, it is better to have separate wills for separate assets. Also, coming to trust, your Indian trust will hold your Indian assets, but you could create an offshore trust in a favorable jurisdiction to hold your worldwide assets and plan for its succession. So, I mean, you could create a Singapore trust, which could hold your assets in different parts of the world. The Indian exchange control laws are pretty stringent over here, but other countries, some of the countries do have liberal laws, which may allow the trust in a country to hold international assets as well. So this was about cross-border estates. And just concluding on that, I mean, I would also like to add, in the initial conversation we had discussed that, we hear a lot about these offshore trusts and entities in the news when it comes. So just one clarification over here, apart from what we hear in the news, I mean, it will get flashed in the news only when, something goes wrong with the trust. But a lot of families, like whether they are listed company promoters, private companies, or even individuals, they have created these kind of structures primarily to plan for their succession, maybe for special children requirement, even for US inheritance taxes purpose, which are purely legal structures. These will not appear in the news because they're all legal structures. I mean, if we also hear about a lot of shell companies, but there are a lot of other companies which are operating properly, where there is no, such kind of cases which are coming up. So similarly, even for trust, there are such kind of trusts which are created to hide wealth, but there are genuine structures as well.
So you're saying that formation of trust can also be misused, as you said, for hiding certain assets.
So I would say that, any structure, any legal structure, whether it is a trust, HUF, company, or you're individually also, whatever you're doing, or, basically when you're misusing it is basically laundering of money. It's black money. So any structure can be misused, but these same structures are also used genuinely for your genuine purpose requirement. So that goes well with all of them. And what we see a lot about in the news, especially the offshore structures which are, created in these tax havens, because there is no tax over there. There is a lot of, such kind of structures which are created to evade taxes in these jurisdictions.
I would be later asking you the questions that are being put up in chat, but I don't know if you are covering this, but what is the difference between private trust and a charitable trust?
So as I explained earlier, a private trust is only for the benefit of your own family members. You do not have an outsider involved over here, whereas a charitable trust is for the benefit of public at large. So there are a lot of people who could contribute funds. It could be multiple people. And this fund can be then used for charitable objectives, basically for the poor and the needy people, for their education, healthcare. And these charitable trusts, they also enjoy tax benefits, whereas a private trust doesn't enjoy any tax benefit. It's rather a tax neutral vehicle where, you know, the similar amount of tax has to be paid what an individual would pay otherwise. But because it is only for, you know, the benefit of the poor and needy, it gets a tax benefit. So this is
So that tax benefit is under 80G, section 80G.
Yeah, section 80G and section 12A also. Section 80G is for the person who is contributing, and otherwise whatever is the income of the trust, even that is tax exempt. So I am almost completed with my session. Just the last slide. Most of the times I'm asked this question that should I have a will or should I create a trust? Now, even when we are creating a private trust to meet our specific objectives, whether it is inheritance tax planning, family business succession, we will see that we are only moving some part of our assets in the name of the trust. And it is something like, you know, gradually we will keep moving assets and keep funding assets. At times, like for example, we may not be able to move immovable property into the name of the trust, but the trust can always buy an immovable property. So it's a structure which gets created and you keep adding on properties. But apart from this, you will have assets outside your trust, like your LIC policies, your own bank account, maybe some jewelry. For that, you still require a will. So will, I would say, is a must for everybody to create a succession plan, and a private trust being more efficient, it can meet your specific objectives.
So Namita, there are some questions that club members have put up on chat. I'm just going to read them out for you. If you could respond to them. Reva Dayal has asked, if the executor of a will dies before the maker, is the will still legal?
So the will would still be legal. So even if the executor dies, any family member can come forward and take up the execution of the will. So they can apply to play the role of the executor, and the will is still good to go.
Anil Shankar wants to know, can an unregistered will be challenged on the ground of undue delay in producing the will? For example, a probate application is made 20 years after the death of the testator. Does that constitute delay and probate denied on that ground?
So normally for a will, there is no law of limitation that applies. Even if a will is produced after a couple of years, the court will still entertain it. Normally for other kind of disputes, property disputes, there is a law of limitation.
No, you're saying couple of years. I mean, that's very different from the question. He's asking 20 years later, somebody suddenly produces.
Yeah, sir. So
is there a time limit? I mean, it's like
no
some of the other things like 5 years or whatever it is. No time limit?
No time limit. So nothing has been prescribed. So it can be produced even at a later point of time.
Oh, okay. Mr. Iqbal Mehra wants to know, how does one enjoy the returns on the assets that are transferred into the trust?
How does one enjoy the returns? So you transfer assets in the name of the trust. For example, like, there is a mutual fund, which may, then get some income under it, maybe some capital gains. That will come in the name of the trust. And if somebody wants to enjoy that, the trust will make a distribution to the beneficiary. The trust bank account, a distribution is made to the beneficiary bank account, and the beneficiary can then use that asset.
Okay. Mr. Vora wants to know, what is a typical cost of setting up and running a trust? So
this initial setup cost, the initial cost for setting up a trust is a little higher. I mean, it totally depends upon the type of the trust that you are creating. For example, if it's a business trust, or if it is a case which involves cross-border succession, where there could be US beneficiaries. So the cost varies from a trust to trust. If it's a simple trust where all the parties are Indian, where somebody is doing it purely for succession planning, where there is no business succession involved, no cross-border laws involved, then the cost could be lower. But there is no definitive figure that I could give you, because it totally depends upon.
But can you give a range? I mean, if you're talking about a private family trust, is there a ballpark figure? It's 5 lakhs or 50,000 or whatever, some figure.
Sir, so if I have to give you a ballpark figure, maybe, for a very trust, which is an Indian trust, which does not family business or cross-border estate, maybe it would be around 3 lakh rupees, the minimum size for that, for cost of setting up trust. Once the trust has been set up, there wouldn't be really an ongoing cost to it, except that it would have to file the tax returns. Only if somebody is appointing a corporate trustee or a professional trustee. In such a situation, then the person may need to pay professional trusteeship fees. Otherwise, there is no cost involved.
And this cost is not related to the perceived value of the assets that are shown in the trustee.
Not, sir. It is basically depending upon the complexity, has to be given, the different laws, because, this requires a lot of deliberation from the client side, as well as, from the advisors, that who will be the beneficiaries, the successors. So all these discussions take a lot of time, framing up your mind and then putting your thoughts in the trust deed.
Rakesh Mathur wants to know, can the inheritors be appointed as a trustee?
Yes, they can be appointed. So family members, so who are the beneficiaries also, they could also wear the hat of a trustee.
Okay. Those were the questions on chat. If there's anybody else who still has a question, any clarification, please let me know. Anil Shankar says, for probate to be granted, several courts have held that the residuary clause of the law of limitation applies, i.e., the will needs to be produced within 3 years of the death of a testator, since no specific time period is specified for wills under the Limitation Act.
No, sir. I mean, because even we have, obtained probate for some of our clients where more than 3 years have gone by, but still the court will accept that will. Because for a will, there is no prescribed law of limitation. Because we have done it for some of our clients.
Okay. Any other queries? If there are no queries, Namita, can you just put the last slide up again? I think in case anybody wants to contact the company and get further information or assistance, they could write to this email ID which is on the board.
Yeah.
And otherwise call Minsha. Okay, the number is given there, Minsha's number is given there. All right, so with that, I would like to once again take the opportunity to thank Namita and the team of MK Wealth for taking the time out to answer the queries of the members of the club and also explaining to us what are the steps in formation of a private trust, as well as the benefits of forming a trust. But irrespective of all that, what you did say in your last slide was that a will is a must. And of course, within the will, you specify what are the, who are the beneficiaries of the trust, I suppose. Rakesh Mathur says, thanks, this was very informative. Is Rakesh Mathur's camera on? Rakesh, can you switch on your camera for a moment? I think Rakesh is being camera shy. Sonia Mehta says, thank you. All right. So with that, we come to an end of another session of our Zoom in series. Thank you so much, Namita.
Thank you, sir.
And for the viewers, we will announce our next Zoom in session soon. Till then, enjoy the upcoming festivities, the Navratra starting tomorrow, and the rest of the festival season. So, goodbye and good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating.